Number 11 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Procedure and House Affairs. I'd like to start the meeting by providing you with some information following the motion that was adopted in the House on Wednesday, September 23rd, 2020. The committee is sitting in hybrid format, meaning that all members can participate either virtually or in person. The witnesses, however, must appear virtually. The committee's power to sit are limited by the priority use of House resources, and all questions during committee must be decided by a recorded vote unless the committee disposes of it with unanimous consent or on division. And finally, the committee may deliberate in camera, provided that it takes into account the potential risks of participants participating remotely. So today's proceedings are being made available via the House of Commons website, and a reminder that only the person speaking is being webcasted, not the entirety of the committee. So feel free, there has been the need because we do work past the lunch hour. I understand that we don't even actually take the breaks that we used to sometimes when we were all physically present there. And so feel free to, if you need to, take a quick water break or food. And I know sometimes that's important depending on different health conditions as well. So, don't feel obligated that you have to be on at all times when the camera's not on you. Members and witnesses may speak, as you know, in both either official language of their choice, and interpretation services are available for this meeting. But I want to emphasize, like I have been stating before, that it is mandatory to wear a headset with a boom mic. And these headsets have been provided by the House of Commons. If you're missing a headset, they are very quick at getting you another headset. I do understand that the headset does not function or does not plug into phones or iPads, and therefore I can understand maybe having to do that in an emergency situation, but please try your best to use the provided headset and have that, or an adapter, I believe, can be sent over. I don't know if it exactly is the best choice though. So try to use your desktop or your Surface Pro that you might have because the interpreters are having problems. So I'm not just saying this today, just because I feel like filling the time. I'm saying it because there have been real concerns, and they will refuse to interpret if you are not wearing a mic and they cannot hear you appropriately. So our official languages and being able to speak in both official languages is very important, and our committee would not be able to proceed without the work of the interpreters. So let's please try to do our best to make sure we follow their guidelines and their requests because this does make it a lot easier for them. Okay, so before speaking, like always, just want to remind you to unmute yourselves. It's not being done for you. Unmute yourselves and then put yourself back on mute afterwards so there's no interruptions. And if there's any technical problems that arise, please let the chair or the clerk know immediately because we may need to suspend to ensure that everyone can participate fully. Speak slowly and clearly. Yeah, and I think that is about it. So we can start. Today we have...
Madam Chair, if I may, I just on the point about interpretation, if I could briefly, I believe that the whip's offices of the respective parties have had access to information about the injury rates among our interpreters. I'm wondering if you might be able to obtain that information and table it for the committee, because members might find it informative, and it might be a nice way to encourage all members to make sure that they are using a proper headset, because the numbers are actually quite impressive in a bad way when you see them laid out on paper.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think even when we had the association appear before us as a witness previously in the virtual House of Commons study, that testimony was surprising because I don't think a lot of us realized the stress and the injuries that can be caused to those providing those services. And so I will ask for that information. Thank you, Mr. Blakey, for letting me know that that's available. And I think that would be encouraging to members, because I know sometimes we think that it sounds okay to us, and therefore, it shouldn't be a problem, but we should definitely be following the guidelines that they have set out for us, when possible. And I understand emergencies do occur, but those are exceptional circumstances, and they shouldn't be. It shouldn't become a routine practice to not use this headset. Okay, so let's start with. We've got on the main estimates. Today, we have Monsieur Perrault back before our committee today from Elections Canada, the Chief Electoral Officer. Thank you so much, Monsieur Perrault, for being back again. We have Michel Rousseau, Deputy Chief Electoral Officer and for Electoral Events and Innovation. And we have Mark. I just asked how to pronounce this, and I'm going to try to do my best. Limoges. Is that correct? Mark Limoges. Okay, thank you so much. And he is the Chief Financial Officer. So we will start with opening remarks. I believe the opening remarks are from Monsieur Perrault. And Monsieur Perrault, you have 5 minutes. Thank you. And thank you for providing those remarks in advance.
Thank you. I will be beginning in French, and I will let you know when I switch languages, and I do hope it won't cause any confusion or issues for the interpreter. So first of all, thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity to present to the committee Elections Canada's 2020-2021 main estimates. I will also take advantage of this opportunity to briefly reflect on the conduct of the October 26 by-elections and the need to swiftly pass targeted legislative change to deliver a general election in these very challenging pandemic circumstances. So, Elections Canada is funded under two distinct authorities: an annual appropriation, renewed annually, and a standing statutory authority. Today, the committee will be voting on the annual appropriation, which amounts to $48.2 million and represents the salaries of some 530 indeterminate positions. The agency also has a standing statutory authority to draw directly from the Consolidated Revenue Fund for all expenses related to its mandate, other than the salaries of indeterminate staff. This funding model allows Elections Canada to access the funds required to plan and deliver elections, which may occur at any time, and ensures its independence. Planned spending under the statutory authority is reported for transparency and accountability, clearly. The statutory appropriation for the fiscal year 2020-2021, as reported in the main estimates, totaled $85.5 million. This was for 2020-21. However, the main estimates for 2020-2021 were submitted before the end of the general election of 2019. As a result, they do not reflect the costs associated with remaining ready to deliver a general election in a minority government context, nor do they reflect the additional costs resulting from required measures for the pandemic.
To English, if that's appropriate at this point. So being ready to administer an election is at the core of Elections Canada's mandate. In a minority government situation, maintaining a constant state of readiness involves additional costs. These costs include preparing and deploying IT hardware to regional warehouses, for example, replenishing electoral supplies, as well as hiring and training a contingent of temporary personnel. For the current fiscal year, we have incurred to date an additional expenses totaling $99 million from the statutory appropriation to be prepared to deliver an election at any time in this pandemic context. Of this, $52 million relates directly to the pandemic, including the purchase of protective equipment such as masks and hand sanitizer, improvement to vote by mail capacity, a new voter information campaign on the safety measures, and a more extensive campaign to recruit election workers. The pandemic has also affected our ongoing activities. Most Elections Canada staff now work from home. To support this transition to telework, we have invested in tablets and other equipment. While not without challenges, this arrangement is working well, and we are equipped to deliver the next election with most, if not all, staff working remotely if that is required. Now, since I appeared last before this committee, Elections Canada has administered by-elections in Toronto Centre and York Centre, two regions with high rates of COVID-19. While the by-elections were delivered successfully, they also demonstrated the challenges presented by the pandemic, including the need for coordination with three public health authorities in the City of Toronto, the Province of Ontario, and the federal government. A general election during a pandemic will be even more complex in this regard and will require engaging with health authorities at the local, provincial, territorial, and federal levels, as well as with over 600 First Nation reserves, some of which have their own COVID-19 protocols. The experience of the recent by-elections only strengthens my conviction that the conduct of a federal election during a pandemic requires an ability to adapt to changing circumstances. This is why I can only reiterate the importance of the recommendations that I presented earlier this fall and need to act on these recommendations quickly so that we are able to implement them in a timely manner. Madam Chair, I am happy to work with the committee and, of course, to answer any questions the members will undoubtedly have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Perreault. I have definitely informed the committee as well that we need to get working and take care of those recommendations so that we can get you working on making sure that you can provide a safe and secure election. So we will start with the first round of questions with Ms. Vecchio.
Thank you very much. And once again, thank you so much for returning to our committee. It seems like months and months ago, because, with COVID, everything is just always on a full tilt ahead. I want to start off with a very simple question, because I know a lot of times with registrations and things, a lot of that information comes from sources such as Canada Revenue Agency. Has there been any issues with getting that information downloaded from different agencies to Election Canada for registration of voters?
I am not aware, and Mr. Roussel can jump in if he is aware of any situations where there has been difficulties with the flow of data with our partners. We have some 40 data partners that we interact with, and we haven't had any difficulties that I can report to the committee.
Those are just some things that I really wanted to talk about, because I was just thinking of specific things like with COVID. Due to COVID, we've been allowed to allow Canadians to register or to complete their taxes at different times. We know that information is downloaded from CRA to Elections Canada. So I was just wondering how the flow of information was when there has been a change to deadlines and a change to many things that are happening right now. So if you could check to see if there has been any changes. What are some of the other organizations that you currently get some of these registration information from this data bank to look at the registration list?
I don't have the full list in front of me and be happy to provide that, but certainly we get a lot of information, for example, from the motor vehicle bureaus of the provinces. In all provinces except one, we have motor vehicle data, so that is quite useful. We do exchange data with provincial electoral management bodies. It's a two-way exchange, so we help each other in keeping the registry up to date. There are variations depending on the province, but we do interact with all EMBs. Mr. Roussel, I'll perhaps let Mr. Roussel jump in, because he of course knows much more about some of the other partners that we have.
And that would be great. And as he does jump in, I just want to look at that, because with motor vehicle agencies, places like that, I'll be honest, I'm driving with an old sticker because our place is still not open yet and that we've had some delays. So I'm just kind of thinking about with the COVID restrictions on getting plates and getting different things like that, how are you working with these agencies to ensure that the registration is correct, that notifications, whether it's deaths or whether it's moving, that these are all up to date? So that'd be wonderful. We can move on. Fantastic.
Okay, so before Michelle Roussel speaks, I'll just say that, of course, one of the virtues of having online registration, and during the election or in the lead up to an election, if we know when it's coming, we do push voters to go online and verify the accuracy of their information and keep it up to date. So that's an important tool. Michelle Roussel?
Okay, thank you. In addition to what was mentioned by the Chief Electoral Officer, we also have partnership with the vital statistics of the provinces. So, so the deceased electors can be taken off the voters list. We also have partnership with the Immigration Refugees, IRCC, Immigration Refugees Citizenship Canada, for the purpose of adding new citizens and also validating that people are actually Canadian citizens. So these are regular partnerships. These are ongoing.
Awesome.
We will, yes.
Yeah, I just want to ask, for instance, vital statistics, that's such an important part when it comes to deaths. How often is that downloaded, that information? Is it every 30 days, every 6 months? Can you give me some information on that, if you don't mind?
Well, I could get a clarification on the pace, but it's more on a quarterly basis with vital statistics.
Okay. Yeah, I just think that's really, really important stuff. When we're looking at those to make sure that we have accurate lists. I think that is one of the most important things coming from the Elections Canada side. I do recognize that you can do it on registration, that you can go online, but sometimes those lists are also, when you get back, I've seen people that have unfortunately been deceased for multiple years. And I'll tell you, as a candidate calling those homes, it's very, very embarrassing when you find out that poor Fred has not been with you for 10 years. Yet he's still on an election list. So if we could look into that, I'd really appreciate it. I saw one thing as well on there on the table. It shows the $3,230,000 for the electoral boundaries. This will probably go back to Mr. Perreault, but I'm just looking at these readjustments of the boundaries for the 2020-2021. Has any work started on that yet?
Work is only beginning. We are starting to put together a team to plan the work, but there's been limited work on that project so far.
Okay, so the allocated of over $3 million, then I assume some of that, well, then you're hoping will be rolled over into the next year's budget, that we should not be actually spending over $3 million on a project right now, or where are you sitting with that?
I would expect that that's the case, correct.
Okay, good to know. Ruby, sorry, how much time do I have left before I get into my next?
You have almost a minute, a little less.
Okay, fantastic. That's really important. During a minority government, you recognize that so many people are working from home right now. What are some additional costs other than computers and tablets? What other things are we helping so that people are getting this work done in those remote areas, such as Elgin, Middlesex, London, to make sure that we can ensure that we're ready? What else are we putting into work for Mr. Perreault?
So I think we have to distinguish between the work that takes place at headquarters, and so we've equipped all of our staff to be able to work effectively from home, and I think that, as I've indicated, that is working generally very well. Now we also have to equip returning officers. Returning officers are working from their home all the time in a way that's normal for them. In a minority context, what we do is we provide them with tasks, for example, to look in the area for potential polling places, to start engaging with local care facilities or Indigenous communities. So we have a schedule of tasks that they do, but they are working remotely as an ongoing way normally. So for them, it is not that much of a change. I think what's important is that they have guidelines from health authorities, that they understand what they need to do to remain safe at all times.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Mr. Turnbull, 6 minutes.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and thanks, Mr. Perreault, for coming back. Always great to see you. And I know you have a busy schedule and lots of important work to do, so we appreciate you being here. My questions are related to expenses or the estimates. And so just to recap, in your opening remarks, you said that the statutory appropriation was actually, calculated prior to the current context. In other words, you couldn't have predicted the pandemic and the added costs of even operating within a minority context at that time. Is that right?
That's correct. And that's one of the reasons why we have a statutory appropriation, which is an ongoing authority, is the unpredictable nature to a certain degree of the electoral cycle, whether it's by-elections or general elections in the minority, and in this case, of course, the pandemic. So it is a very significant advantage to be able to draw on this over and above anything that we may have planned and report on it, and of course account for it. But that's how we use it.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and thanks. I just wanted to clarify and make that clear. And it's 99 million would be the additional expenses that essentially are being proposed, or that you're estimating. Is that correct?
Well, most of them have been engaged in the sense that we have procured, for example, for supplies. We've not necessarily paid for those supplies, but the money is engaged.
Got it. Okay, good stuff. So in some of those categories, you've sort of committed funds based on those contracts. But I want to get down to some specific questions now. We've heard from multiple stakeholders that and yourself included earlier on when we heard from you that the vote by mail process is the capacity for dealing with a large influx of electors that want to vote by mail is we can anticipate that influx ahead of time. So to what degree is that being prioritized in your estimates of costs increases there, and how are we increasing the capacity? Could you unpack that a little bit more for me in terms from a budgetary perspective?
Okay, so we certainly I certainly can. You won't see a lot of the costs in the estimates. There's some of that money. For example, there's roughly 10 million that's earmarked. Mr. Limage will correct me if necessary. That's for the mail itself, including prepaid postage. So we will, for the first time, we'll have prepaid postage of the mail ballots, so that people do not abstain from voting for that reason. So that's one expense. We've also procured additional machinery to prepare the kits before they're sent out, to assemble the kits. So there's an additional expense for that. I believe it's just under, it's around 900, but we can confirm that. Most of the work is not about expenses. It's about designing the process, and it's about reviewing the procedures. We will have a decentralized process to deal, and I think I explained that when I appeared last time. So apologies if I'm repeating myself, but it's critical for us to be able to manage up what we think will be up to 5 million mail-in ballots, to break it down in chewable chunks. To deal with that, we will deal with it locally. So each returning office will have additional staff and space to receive and process applications, and then to process the count. So that's essentially the strategy for the national election.
Thank you very much. Okay, that's very helpful, because I think many of us believe in a streamlined process and making that as easy as possible, and being able to deal with the large number that will be coming in effectively. I know the other thing that I've been concerned about and asked many witnesses about is, the sort of information campaign and reassuring voters of the safety of the different methods of voting. Obviously, there's additional cost to following the public health guidelines in terms of how we set up sites and, deal with foot traffic coming through the various polling locations. But, I think the information campaign is probably also going to increase or need to increase. So I'm anticipating that. I'm kind of assuming that. I think that's one of your other maybe expense categories that will increase. Is that correct? And can you tell us how much and what the plans are for that?
Absolutely. I think it's a very important question. So the amount is $3 million that we have earmarked for that campaign. It's a lot of money. It's a very important aspect of the election in the pandemic. It's also related to mail-in voting. I think to all extent possible, we want people to vote in a regular way. If they feel that they can safely go to their local polling location, as they normally do, and they are reassured that they can do so in a safe way, they will do so, and it will facilitate the work for everybody, including recruitment of poll workers. So the two things are very, very closely tied. It's one thing to prepare for a large mail-in, but you do not want to to push everybody to vote by mail because they don't understand the safety measures in place.
Yeah, that's a good point. Can I just check with you on how much of what percentage increase would that be compared to a normal general election that would be outside of a pandemic context?
Quickly, so please.
We can come back with the details, but it's roughly $20 million in a general election.
So it's increasing by 3 million. So it would be 23. Okay, thank you.
But we'll come back with those numbers with if you allow me to be clear.
That would be great. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Monsieur Terrien, 6 minutes.
Mr. Terrien. Bonjour.
Good morning, Mr. Perrault, Mr. Roussel, and Mr. Limoges. It's great to hear from you. Thanks for appearing virtually. First thing, financing of political parties. That's one of your responsibilities, right? Answer, yes. Question. The Bloc Québécois was the only party not to ask for salary subsidies. At first, that was not meant for political parties, and what I understood is that there was a regulation that introduced a way for political parties to get more money during the pandemic. The Liberal Party got some subsidies like that. It seems like they stopped in September. The Conservatives got some money out of it, but then they've stopped recently in September, I believe. And neither of the political parties will be reimbursing the money. And the Green Party and the NDP are still getting money out of the salary subsidies, even though that subsidy was meant for companies that were about to go bankrupt. Were you informed by the government that it might be possible that the political parties would get money from that? Answer, we did not get any contact with the government on that issue. I might be wrong, but I think that we got one question from one political party, but I would have to check. But you have to know that for the rules for the funding of political parties is not only about, it's not limited to one type. So political parties can get their funding through different sources of income. So investments, credits, tax credits. So if those sources of income, as long as they're not regulated contributions, it's fine. So I know the position of the Bloc, and I know that the Parliament will have to debate it, but it's not a contribution, it's a source of income, and there are others in the Act. I understand, but when you talk about investments that political parties can get, it's understood that if political parties invest money in the bank, they can get a return on their investment. That's fine. Each political party can manage their coffers the way they want. But now I'm talking about money that was provided by the state through public funding that is meant to finance election activities for political parties. So that's double dipping, because that money that helps political parties will lead to more money that will be granted from the CEO. So I understand the parallel. You're talking about the position of the Bloc, and we're very proud of our position. We did not need to get money from taxpayers. Only people who support us will be supporting our election activities. We trust them and we trust ourselves, but I still believe that if in the current system there should not be any public funding, and if in some weird way with the pandemic political parties were able to get public funding, I don't think it's right. Don't you think that we should question the public funding with that loophole? We should sit down, we should have a look at what political parties should get. We would have to and we should put an end to loopholes that benefit political parties that do not deserve it. Answer, I don't want to take a position in this debate. I believe that your rationale is a legitimate one. There are other tax credits that political parties can use, just like other organizations, tax credits. So these are amounts that come from the public purse, and political parties are not excluded, so they are eligible to those funds, but those amounts are not regulated, even though those amounts
Well, then I'm going to ask you another question. I know the answer to this, but I'm going to try and ask the question anyway. I'm wondering if you yourself are uncomfortable with this situation. It's a rather awkward situation. Well, my role is to administer the act. That's what we're here for. We do it according to the rules that are set out. So I think that's the answer that you were expecting. Yes, actually it was.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Blakey, please.
Thank you very much. I just wondered, so I take your point that the estimates were submitted in advance of the pandemic, and so they don't reflect additional pandemic spending. There is quite a bit more spending projected under the statutory authorities. I'm just wondering if you can speak a little bit to why the projected statutory spending is as high as it is, and the extent to which, I know you talked about, and correct me if I'm wrong, some of the pandemic preparation coming out of your statutory authorities. To what extent, because I noticed there is no submission for your office in the supplementary estimates B. So I'm just wondering how that works. To what do you anticipate needing any further voted authorities from Parliament, or are you comfortable that you can respond to the possibility of a snap election and the pandemic within existing statutory authorities?
Sorry, just to be clear, I do not expect to ask additional funds from the annual vote, which is for the permanent staff, so that will remain. I don't think I will be needing additional money there. The rest on the statutory authority, I do not require to go through Parliament. In the past, we sometimes have made projections through the supplementary estimates, just in terms of transparency. In recent years, Treasury Board has indicated that we need not go there, that typically our amounts are not sufficiently material to go through the estimates, so I don't know how that will take place this year. But they're only there for transparency reasons. So, but I'd like to come back to your initial question, because there are a few elements to it. The first point I would make before I go there, however, is that the estimates were submitted not only prior to the pandemic, but prior to the results of the last election. So the minority status was not factored in. Okay, so there are two aspects. What was factored in was $85.5 million. If I can break that down a little bit, if you look at that, there's money for example, licenses and leases in the amount of $9 million, $15 million for salaries and of terms and casuals, and $17 million for professional services. There's also money related to the last election in that. So there are expenses that were still being paid in this fiscal year for the last general election. If you look then at the 99 million, as I indicated in my remarks, there's 52 million for essentially protective measures and adaptations for the pandemic. The balance of that, the main items, and I'd be happy to provide details to the committee. We have $7.3 million to deploy the hardware in regional offices. So that's the package, all of the IT equipment that's used in our offices, install the software, deploy it locally, and then there's a Canada Post monthly fee to maintain that in the local. So we're ready if an election is called. We have $7.5 million in expenses for returning offices, for regional meetings, trainings, and special assignments, such as engaging with Indigenous communities, engaging with long-term care facilities.
On that point, if I may, because it's a good segue to some other questions I have. So I might just ask if you could table that breakdown with the committee. That would be very much appreciated. Yep. But I know you had you just mentioned engagement with First Nation communities. We had the Assembly of First Nations here at committee, which you may well know. I imagine you're following our study closely. And one of the things that they had indicated was some frustration on the part of particular First Nations who had wanted polling stations in their community, didn't feel that they were able to get them. So I'm wondering, what are you planning to change in terms of outreach in order to be, and the other thing we heard was that the earlier you're able to start in terms of that outreach, and the earlier, in fact, that you might be able to identify and begin to train some people in local First Nation communities who would like to have polling stations, the better off they'll be in order to be able to respond. So I'm wondering what work you're doing now and what kind of resources are being dedicated in order to be able to prepare First Nations communities who want to have polling stations in their community in the context of this pandemic that we're all living through. What can they expect from Elections Canada?
So this is a very, very good questions, important questions for us. The issue of having polling sites on reserves has been an ongoing challenge for us over the years. It's something that we tried to improve at the last election. We did try to engage, and we did engage ahead of the last election with local First Nation reserves in order to increase the presence. Now, First Nations do not always wish to have a polling site, and I know Mr. Terrien in his writing, that's been a historical situation where we've not been successful in having a polling site there. We have to respect that. Okay, but we do have to make efforts to make sure that we can respond to the demands of First Nations and that they're engaged earlier rather than later. In the last election, there was an increase, not as much as I would have liked. So we had 389 reserves with polling sites compared to 366 in the previous election. So it's a small increase. I know there were a few instances where First Nations would say, we do not want to have a polling site. And then once the VICs were issued and there were local discussions, then they wished to have a polling site. So this is a challenge, but we've, to all extent possible, we've adjusted to that. I do not know of a single case where we are not able to accommodate a request for a polling site in First Nations. Now, in terms of what we're doing, we will have returning officers engaging locally. We plan to have them start in January or February after Christmas with First Nations reserves. Whether or not there's an election, this is not an indication, but they will be starting to engage with First Nations to talk about sites, but also to talk about safety measures and to talk about recruitment. We do want to have as much as possible First Nations serving their communities. And so the more we can recruit locally, I think the better it is for us. It helps simplify the process, I think, for everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Perro. Mr. Tordy, 5 minutes.
PROC, thank you for being here again. Can you clarify for me your comment that you made to Mr. Blakey, that these estimates were prepared for prior to our previous election? Would that have been in Q1, Q2 of 2019?
They were, if I'm not mistaken, and Mr. Limoges knows this, of course, and he'll answer, but I think they were prepared either in late September or late October. That's when or early October. That's when they were submitted to Treasury Board.
And have they been updated? I'm a small business owner. I also ran budgets for a federally operated operation, and I know that situations change, such as a global pandemic. Have they been adjusted accordingly, or is this a case where you're going to report back to the committee in Q2 or Q3 of next year and say, hey, we were hundreds of millions of dollars under budgeted?
I think it depends largely on the events. I'm reporting today, for example, on how much, in addition, we've incurred so far, depending on whether there's an election or not. Certainly, when we plan, when we report on our results, we will be reporting on how much at the end we will have spent. And there are always some variations between the plans and the.
Especially during a global pandemic.
Especially during a pandemic, especially during a minority situation. For example, the by-elections are never budgeted.
Right.
So we just had 2 by-elections.
I really appreciate that comment. It still is shocking for me a little bit. Mr. Perreault, you indicated during your last testimony that you had not consulted with the Prime Minister on how a snap pandemic election would be conducted. We are seeing increased rates right across our country, especially in my province of British Columbia. Yukon just announced severe measures. I think we're going into another lockdown. Saskatchewan. The rates are going through the roof. Have you had any chance to consult with the Prime Minister on that?
No, and we would not normally do that. The calling of elections is the prerogative of government. In my 15 years at elections, we've never had any discussions about the likelihood of an election.
Have you consulted with Dr. Theresa Tam?
I've spoken with her personally in September, but there are ongoing discussions, of course, with her team and members of my staff.
Has she outlined any specific concerns that she had in terms of conducting a federal pandemic election?
Not that I'm aware. The nature of the advice that they provide is advice on how to deliver an election and what measures to put in place, not whether to deliver an election.
Okay. Now, the minister appeared before a committee for two hours on Tuesday, was very generous with his time, but he also spoke of concerns regarding foreign interference. We know that we're seeing lots of talk of that south of the border. The job of this committee, and I see that as this study, is to provide the assurances to the Canadian public that it's safe, it's secure, and that our democratic institutions are going to be intact. Have you budgeted any money in terms of any foreign interference, and in what terms could there be foreign interference in a state of or a weakened state during a global pandemic? In your thoughts?
Well, we have established in the lead up to the last election a working group well advanced of the last election because of the emergence of foreign interference as a phenomenon and the use of social media. So we have a working group that involves government security partners, including the Communication Security Establishment of Canada and the Centre for Cybersecurity. And so we have done in the past, and we continue, we have plans to do that this fall, tabletop exercises to look at different scenarios.
Great.
The only difference this time is that we've included the Public Health Agency because of potential disinformation about health.
Right. Now, Mr. Perreault, we're talking, I want to talk about the mail-in ballots during a pandemic election situation. You stated before, you stated this time now, it's 5 million mail-in votes, almost 100 times more than the last election. What are we doing, and how much money has been spent to prepare for that? And are you confident that Canada Post will be ramped up to be able to handle that capacity?
So I can, we'll have to follow up on the details of the amounts. As I'd indicated earlier, most of the work will be done locally. So the planning does not necessarily involve major spending. There is $10 million earmarked for the postage itself and some additional machinery. But the plan is on the logistics and on to simplify the process, especially for people.
I just have one real last, and it was a suggestion made to me by somebody that's probably listening in. You know, lots of talk in the election south of the border about, did my vote count? How can I be assured with the mail-in accounts? Is there such a thing that we could institute, maybe as a recommendation, that those that are putting in their mail-in ballots, that they can go online, like when they're tracking a parcel, that can say, hey, your vote counted, it's registered?
Yes. So unfortunately, we cannot do that. We are looking at options to inform voters that their kits have been sent to them. But we are working with Canada Post, and their parcel service has a tracking option, but not their general mail delivery. There are ways that this can be done, and it's something that we could explore in the future. But if we're looking at a spring election, this is not something that we could implement in the short term. What we will be doing is informing as clearly as possible electors of the timelines and the importance of submitting their mail-in kits on time. And
Thank
again,
you, Mr. Perreault. We've gone
well
over
point
time
of order,
now,
Madam Chair. Point of order.
Yeah.
Does the witness know that we're having a spring election?
Yeah, good question.
I think it's elections. I think I can answer this one. It is
I'm just kidding.
To be prepared at any given moment. So
I wanted the witness
to do a fine job at that. Okay, we are going to move on to Mr. Alghabra for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and welcome back, Mr. Perreault. And let me congratulate you and Elections Canada on being retweeted by President Trump and getting the most viral tweet ever for Elections Canada.
Yes, that's right.
Can I comment on that?
Please go ahead, but don't take too much of my time. But go ahead.
Well, I was hoping to get a question on that because I welcome the opportunity to clarify some points here. We were responding to very, very high levels of questions and confusion and misinformation about how federal elections works. And the goal of our communications team was simply to put out the facts and not to make any comments on tabulation technology or any particular service provider. I do want to add that there are some very good reasons for election management bodies to use various types of technology in support of election services, including but not necessarily tabulation. And that in Canada, a number of provinces, and we have people here from New Brunswick and Ontario, a number of provinces, including those two, have been leading the way in this area, and frankly, quite successfully. And we are working with them and learning from them. And Elections Canada, we have been exploring, and we will continue to explore the use of technology, not necessarily tabulation, but the use of technology to improve electoral services. And I do believe that the future of elections will involve some technology, and that this can be done in a safe and secure way. So I find it unfortunate that the impression is given that technology is not secure or cannot be secure.
No, I think I understood, and most of us understood the reason why Elections Canada posted that, because you're responding to questions about the methods. But I could tell you that Canadians are watching what's happening down south and are reflecting how grateful we are that we have a reliable federal agency that conducts our election. So on to my questions. Have you finished tabulating the costs that you incurred for the by-elections that happened in October? And how much more do you think you spent on that by-election?
So we have not quite finished. Roughly, it was about $3 million, which is certainly more than an average by-election. But these were Toronto by-elections, so some of the expenses there relate to the fact that media buy in Toronto is more expensive. That rates for rental is a lot more expensive. Normally, a by-election is on average around just under $1 million. So this is significantly more. Some of the costs related to that were tied to the protective measures, certainly, that we put in place. On the other hand, we did have fewer polling locations than we would normally have in a general election, and certainly that's one area of concern for me from those by-elections, is the challenge in finding polling places, and that's one of the reasons why we're recommending Saturday and Sunday voting, and we saw that in Toronto. But in terms of the costs, when we have all of those marked down, we will be reporting on that, but I can say it's around $3 million.
You talked about in your last appearance about the collection of signatures that candidates need to become a certified candidate.
Yes.
And you talked about considering other ways, because right now, going around voters and asking for their signature might not be ideal under this circumstance. Are you considering an online way of for electors to sign this document?
So we're looking at different options right now. I can tell you that there are challenges with the legal requirement for a witness, and that makes the online submission process a very cumbersome one. I am looking at adapting, and again, this is a good example. My power to adapt the rules does not include adapting for reasons of security. It's adapting for voting or for counting of the ballots. And this is a lesson from this by-election, that if I need to adapt to, for example, the signature process for security reasons, then this cannot be done. So in my recommendations report, I do have a recommendation to have a bit of a broader power to adapt, but I will be looking at ways to have an online submission, and that may be that may require tweaking some of the rules.
And by the way, you may want to look at the House of Commons. A couple of years ago now, we've been accepting e-petitions where citizens can submit their signature online. And then the reason why I'm asking about this question, because as we expect mail-in ballots to increase, or what we call a special ballot, the earlier we have candidates firmed up, the better it is to have their names printed on the ballot. So if you start sending ballots way early where names of the candidates are not printed, the voters expected to write in the name, and that may create another form of confusion. So I was hoping, because of this situation or scenario, if there's a way for us to require that candidates are certified earlier, so the mail-in ballots can have the names on them.
Thank you. That's all the time that we have. I think that's more of maybe a comment or a suggestion. I guess we can take it at this point, or we'll maybe get a response to it later on. But I was going to say, and I won't take this obviously out of the time, but the tabulator issue was, and online voting systems were looked at by the Electoral Reform Committee and the Procedure Committee in past parliaments. And obviously, everyone has probably read and heard that, online is not, in the few countries that have done it, there have been some issues, and so is not considered to be completely secure at this point. But I think previously we did have Mr. Perrault as our deputy at that time, and tabulators are being used in Ontario and smaller jurisdictions so that we can properly assess the effectiveness. And just like he said, perhaps we may move to them one day, but at this point, I don't think we foresee us going in that direction. And it was interesting that the president mentioned that because the US has been using tabulators for a very long time, not just this election. So I don't know what it had to do with tabulators, his election per se, but I think it was more about whether they desired to count the ballots or not. But anyways, it was interesting that to see that tweet.
Madam Chair, can I add a few words to that? Please,
yeah.
Thank you very much. We're not looking at tabulation, but we are looking down the road at the very least at having a solution to scan big cars to strike from the list, and we can process voters much more efficiently this way. More importantly, we can allow voters to vote anywhere in a polling station. And for example, for official languages reason, if you have one table that's bilingual, anybody who needs services that in a minority language could go to that table. Right now, you are confined as a voter to your table where your name is on a particular list in a gymnasium. So there's lots of flexibility with very simple technology. It doesn't need to involve tabulation, though there's nothing inherently wrong with tabulation. But technology can enhance the service considerably.
Well, that's interesting. That makes a lot of sense. Monsieur Terrien for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Earlier, you talked about La Prairie, my riding, and it caught my attention because I was wondering why Kanawaki didn't have a polling station on its territory. And in the span of 30 seconds to a minute, could you explain to me the history of that? Because I'm really interested in this. Listen, I don't know the details of the story. What I do know is that in every election, we approach communities to see what polling stations could be set up. And we're going to be doing this work very respectfully. We know that for historical reasons, some communities prefer to not have a polling station. During the last elections, we approached them and we had high hopes. There seemed to be so openness for the very first time. And for reasons that I'm not too sure of, at the last minute, people in the community decided to not have a polling station. So I think people went to vote in Sainte-Catherine. Yes, indeed, Sainte-Catherine. So that's the story, but I don't have many more details. So there are 2 polling stations set aside for Kanawaki and St. Catherine right next door. But I was intrigued by this, so thank you for that information. I have a question. And I hope I won't look silly. I want to know what happens in a minority situation. You've got a budget that is increased because we have a minority government. So you have $99 million extra. That's my understanding. Yes, this budget is a prediction. I have a standing authority to draw money from the consolidated fund. All right, so here's my question. Let's say we have an election in February. What's the mechanism that allows you to go and get the money that isn't budgeted for, but it's predictable you will get that money? But what's the mechanism that gives you access to the money you need? This is covered by the Elections Act, which gives us the legal authority to take money from the consolidated fund in preparation for an election. The budgetary cycles have given us an Elections Act that gives us annual budgets. There are some agencies, not many, but some of them, for employment insurance, for example, they have an authority that is permanent. Parliament voted this once, and it's in place But in our case, it's an authority that's very useful for the reasons you mention. We adjust based on the events and expenditures that come our way. I have a final last question. I hope the chairwoman will be kind to me.
We're much over time, though. I was trying to be kind so that you got your response. Thank you, Mr. Blakey.
Merci, Madame la Présidente, tout de même.
Thank you anyway, Madam Chair.
I want to come back to a question that we addressed a little bit with you the last time that you were before the committee, which is the question of telephone voting. When we heard from folks in the disability community, particularly the Canadian National Institute for the Blind, there was a lot of enthusiasm about the possibility of phone voting. I know it's something that you weren't looking at in your interim report and recommendations. I just wonder if you could speak again to whether that was a principled objection on the part of Elections Canada or whether that's a logistical objection. Because the legislative framework right now doesn't permit it, or because the infrastructure isn't there, and if you could just kind of give your thoughts about telephone voting in general, and whether that's on the medium or a long-term agenda for Elections Canada.
Absolutely. So we do not have in our legal framework provisions for televoting. They exist, telephone voting. They exist in British Columbia, and so they were able to use that. It's a valid question as to whether I could adapt the legislation in a pandemic to deal with unique circumstances. We have to look at that. There are other options as well that we need to look at. For example, homebound voters now who cannot fill a ballot and cannot even fill an application can have somebody assist in their home. Now, in a COVID situation, that's not ideal. But could we use a Zoom interchange? I know in seniors' homes, for example, there's often Zoom capabilities. They've begun to use that to link families with senior members. So we have to look at those options and see how do we do. The key thing for me is how it's safe and secure for the integrity of the vote. The telephone raises a question of how do you provide identification. Federally, every time we vote, we rely on identification documents. If you vote by phone, you're straying more significantly from the framework because you would require some form of identification.
Would the framework that we use for mail-in ballots be able to be adapted for phone? Like if you applied and got a package, for instance, with some kind of unique identifier?
So yes, that could be applied. In which case, you could, for example, provide photocopies of your documents or upload documents on the web. It could be done, but that's of little assistance. For me, the usefulness of phone-in ballots is at the tail end of the period where you're after day 6. You're getting very close to polling day, and it's too late to submit an application for a special ballot kit. But you're right. There are windows of opportunity, and we are exploring that and seeing how much we stray from the regulatory framework that we have in the Act right now to allow that. And then there are the logistics of planning for that in a nationwide election. Again, timing may be everything.
Thank you, Mr. Perreault. Mr. Tucker, please, for 5 minutes.
Yes. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm not hearing.
No, we cannot hear you. We'll start your time if you can start again. No, we're not hearing you. Now you're on mute. Okay, now you're off mute. Try again, Mr. Tucker. No, we're not hearing you. Maybe we can get some tech support. Justin?
I just plugged in again. I was just online. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
And you said I have 6 minutes right now?
You have 5.
5. Thank you again for coming to our committee. On the mail-in ballots, just a little bit on the procedural side. So we send them out. They have prepaid mail. If they put it in the mail system, does it go to Ottawa, then back to the returning officer?
Not if you're voting from your district. If you're a local elector, voting from your home, if you're not away from your home, the mail-in will return to your local returning officer's office. That's one of the features to cut down on some of the travel time in the process. So for a national election, having a centralized process would have added additional travel time.
Good. And is there, you could always drop off your ballots at the returning officer's actual office, correct? Is there a plan to increase, have secure ballot drop-off boxes during a pandemic so that people don't have to actually interact with anybody and just go and put it in a special mailbox that would get collected and then put into your returning officer?
We don't have a plan in place, but we're certainly on our list of things that we are looking into for the next election, because it is much safer if we can have a drop box, for example, very close to the returning office, where people can drive in or walk and drop in their ballots, especially if it's late in the cycle, right, on polling day.
That'd be helpful, and it would also be helpful on budget because you don't pay for that mail if it doesn't get mailed, correct? So as a cost-saving measure, that would be one way of reducing some of the costs, correct? Safely.
I believe that's the case, yes.
I would strongly encourage you to consider that a little bit more, because I think that would be one way of not spending taxpayers' dollars on something that we could do in a different way. Back to the tracing of the mail-in ballots, and to create certainty that that voter had ballot got into at least the returning officer's physical presence. So I understand Canada Post has difficulties on mail tracking it on how it's set up, but what if the voter could go onto a database and search their poll and an ID number and see if the package has arrived? How tough would that be to set up, and is that something you're considering?
We are looking at ways of informing voters when their kit is issued. We'll have to come back to that. That is something that, again, we're having these conversations. The work that we did this fall was just on getting ready for a snap election. Now we're looking at all these kinds of issues in order to improve the service offering for possible. I said spring before that, and I got into trouble.
No,
upcoming.
I know you'll be ready whenever it is, and I trust you.
Yeah,
to have a fair election, and I think we need to be very careful on the experiences coming out of the States. It's perception, not reality, but the perception, to make sure that people perceive this election to be on the up and up. And I know your office and everyone that works within your office is working on that. So I'd encourage you to, and this could be also after the fact. So political parties receive the strike list or the votes that have been cast. Is there anything in the Act that would prevent you from releasing that list to the public after the election, so that people can go back and say, well, did my ballot actually count?
I'd have to look into that. There may be possibly just the Privacy Act allows you to have access to your personal information, but I think there is. I'd have to look into that.
Because I'm assuming that there would be.
I would say it's a bit unfortunate at that point. I understand there's some satisfaction in being confirmed that your ballot made its way, but I think voters would like, ideally, a system that during the election they're informed that in fact it has been delivered. So that would be an ideal solution.
Ideally during, but if it's after, it goes back to keeping that perception and the reality of every ballot counted, or every ballot got it in. And I think that would go a long way if after the fact, that if we can release to the public who voted, blacking out different information on addresses or anything private, but you could go down to even poll number, first initial and last name, that would give assurances that those ballots that were put in the mail, as much as we all trust Canada Post, but we would be a second line of certification that those are there. Just quickly, I know I got limited time. On the cost savings, you talked about there's roughly 500 employees at Elections Canada. What was it like 10 years ago, roughly? Have we ramped up that much in the last 10 years?
I don't have the numbers in front of me. There has been an increase. Some of those numbers, the number 500 is indeterminate employees. It does not include terms casuals. A lot of these fluctuate during an election period. The total number in the sort of low end of the cycle is more around, I would say, 800 staff, and it goes up if you're talking bums and seats, so to speak, including contract. It goes up significantly, almost double during an election. So there's quite a fluctuation. In recent years,
That's all the time we've got, unfortunately, and we're over time. I just wanted you to be able to get out, a sufficient answer for that. Dr. Duncan, 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Perreault. Thank you to all our guests. You're always so gracious with your time. I have a limited amount of time, so I'll be looking largely for a yes/no answer. Mr. Perreault, could you table with the committee how many employees, contract, etc., were hired during the national election? How many mail-in ballots were printed? And how many mail-in ballots were submitted both in Canada and internationally for both the 2015 and 2019 election, please?
I can certainly do that.
Thank you. Could you table with the committee how many people voted in the advanced polls, the number of advanced polls used, and over what time period for both the 2015 and 2019 election, please?
Absolutely. I have some of these numbers in front of me.
I will wait for the tabling. Thank you so much. Do you believe that the nature of the coronavirus outbreaks varies across the country? Yes or no?
Of course. Absolutely.
Thank you so much. You've mentioned that you've been doing your projected costs. Is it possible to table these projections with the committee?
We don't have a projection for the election yet. I think that will depend on some of the preparations we're discussing today. I'm hearing suggestions, and we're working on those. So it's an evolving number.
I understand that. Could we see where that evolving number is? I guess what I'm really looking for are what are the new costs, PPE, barrier protections. Is that possible?
Right now, it's $52 million for that.
And what is the percentage increase, please, over the last election then?
The cost of the election was 507.9 or 8 million.
Could you table that with the committee, please?
Yes.
Thank you. Do you accept that long-term care and retirement residents may require special protocols to ensure people's right to vote?
That is why I've requested some special powers.
Thank you very much. Could you table with the committee the financial reports? I don't know if this is possible, the 2015 and 2019 election. I'm looking for the comparison between what is the usual election and what is the pandemic election, and the difference and the percentage increase or decrease in cost.
So you're asking for the past two elections, the cost
Please.
of those? Yes, we can.
Thank you so much. Now I'm going to ask, if I may, about the Toronto by-elections. Did we use schools?
No, schools were not available for pandemic reasons.
That's what I wanted to hear. Did you install any protections in the polling stations to protect poll staff or voters? There
was a range of protective equipment installed in the polling stations. Not physical barriers in the by-elections. We had shields and masks, and of course hand sanitizers and stickers. We are procuring shields for a general election.
Could you table with the committee what protections were used in the Toronto by-elections, please?
Certainly.
Thank you. Did you have to purchase PPE?
Yes, we did.
Did you have, and could you table the cost for that, please? Did you have to increase or decrease the number of polling stations, advanced polls and polls, please?
Significant decrease because of lack of available areas. We had larger polls, but fewer polling locations. Very difficult to find polling locations.
Thank you for that information. Did you increase or decrease the number of people that you hired?
I believe there was a decrease because of the number of polling stations. There were additional staff in the polling stations for health and safety, but we reduced the poll worker model to a single poll worker for distancing reasons. So it's a mixed answer.
Could you table that with the committee, please?
Absolutely.
Did you have people sign in when they came to vote?
We had a voluntary contact tracing protocol in place.
Could you table the volunteer contact tracing protocol in place, please?
We certainly can.
Thank you so much. Was there contact tracing by the City of Toronto at the time while the two elections were held?
I believe that there were not, but I will verify that.
Thank you so much. Do you think that during an election, should there be one during a pandemic, it will require more polling stations in order to increase physical distancing?
It will either more or larger polling stations, so that the desks within the stations and the people within those areas have sufficient. So it can be a mix of the two.
Thank you, Mr. Perreault. Next, we've got Mr. Lukiski.
Thank you very much, Chair. And
5 minutes.
Thank you, and good afternoon once again, Mr. Perreault. Mr. Perreault, you've mentioned on a couple of occasions that your first priority in a minority situation was to prepare for a snap election. I would assume that you are fully prepared if there were to be a snap election, even if it was called tomorrow. Is that correct?
What I've said is we are prepared to do an election if it were called tomorrow. We were prepared earlier in the fall. The extent of the services available will vary as we move forward. We can improve and adapt what we have in place to deal with the pandemic. But certainly all the basic elements of an election delivery would be there.
Thank you. Of course, there's no guarantee, even if we were in a majority situation, that the government couldn't call an election before the fixed election date. So I would assume that you would have to be prepared for an election, or even by-elections, as we've seen, to be fully prepared at any time. Is that correct?
I would want to nuance that. We always have to look at the situation. If we were 100% prepared at all times, there would be considerable costs. For example, right now we have 50% of our elections staff. These are the additional workforce that we bring in the election. We staff up to 50%, not 100%. Normally in a fixed date election, we don't deploy the technology in the regions until late in the cycle, or if there are signs that there may be an election. There are ongoing monthly fees that are quite significant in terms of maintaining that, for example, that software and hardware deployed regionally. So there are all kinds of decisions points that we make on an election cycle, minority or majority, and when we manage the risk in this way, we are not 100% prepared at all times. Certainly not during a majority.
Well, it must give you some form of comfort, Mr. Perreault, that when Minister LeBlanc was before our committee just 2 days ago, he clearly stated and committed that this government would not be calling a snap election. So your predictions, or at least your observations and ruminations that there may be a spring election, should probably be somewhat allayed right now. I personally don't think we're going into an election anytime soon, but that's only my opinion. But I would ask you this, because I'm just frankly curious. We all hope that there's going to be a vaccine that can be found quickly, and we hope that there can be a vaccine that is proven to be effective and can be distributed across Canada so that every Canadian who wishes to be vaccinated can do so. If that were the case, if every Canadian hypothetically was vaccinated, what impact would that have, in your opinion, on your office and your budget? For an example, there would be obviously less health protocols required. But would it have an impact, in your opinion, on things like mail-in ballots? If everyone was vaccinated, would there be as many mail-in ballots? What would your opinion be as to the voter turnout if the vaccine was completely distributed across Canada? Could you give me just a couple of observations on the future as you see it?
Well, one observation certainly is that the for example, the voters in BC who experience mail-in ballot may not all return to a traditional in-person voting. So even if in that jurisdiction, for example, we were to have a federal election post-pandemic, I would expect to see increased use of mail-in ballot in BC because there are so many people who did that. So it's difficult to predict exactly how this will play out. Certainly, after the pandemic, we will dispose of our protective equipment, and some of it can be put back into the cycle, and we can recover some of that money through Procurement Services Canada, and they'll put it back into the distribution cycle. Others may become obsolete, or the value may go down. So things will evolve, and we'll have to adjust. I must say, it's a bit difficult to predict how that will evolve.
If some of your observations prove to be correct, Mr. Perreault, that the voter turnout, whether it be through mail-in ballot or on-site voting, actually increases because Canadians become more accustomed to actually participating in a general election, I think obviously that would be a good thing. We've seen voter turnout, and you and I have discussed this before, continuously decline over the last several elections. So anything that can be done, perhaps to increase the voter turnout, would be welcomed, I'm sure, by everyone in this country. But should there be increased turnout, Mr. Perreault, what do you think, what impact would that have on your budgets going forward? Do you see that you will be a day, perhaps in the next budgetary cycle, that you would be requesting more money for election preparedness, or would there be a decline going back to nominal figures and nominal budgets in the years past?
Well, I don't see the ebb and flow of participation as having a major impact on the cost of delivery of an election. We always have to assume that there will be a large number of electors, much more than they actually do turn out. For example, the number of ballots, the number of electors on in a polling site on a particular poll. So the number of workers and sites are all done taking account to a certain degree an inflated participation, because we can't assume people will not show up to vote. And so I don't think that this will have a significant impact on the financial aspects of preparing or delivering an election.
Thank you, Mr. Perreault. Mr. Garrettson, 5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Lipinski.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And Mr. Perreault, thank you very much for joining us. And I apologize for my jestful comment earlier. I, of course, know that you have no idea when an election will be, and you were speaking, you were speaking hypothetically. I was going to actually ask you about the tweet that had come out from Elections Canada a few days ago in response to Rebel News outlets' claims of Canada using the Dominion voting systems. And I know that you explained that you thought it was necessary to correct the information, but I'm just curious if you can expand on why you thought it was necessary for Elections Canada to feel the need to correct this disinformation from being spread online.
So there was a lot of, I mean, we can, in hindsight, debate whether it was the right thing to do or not. Certainly there was a very, very high level of confusion and misconception about the federal process, and people were using that in a way that in the volumes that we felt was undermining the confidence in the election. So one of our principles is that we want to be an authoritative source of information about the election, and if there are significant amount of misinformation, then naturally we want to correct that. Now, unfortunately, that tweet was used, and I'd say misused, to imply, and that was not our intent. That technology.
That's great. Thank you. Speaking of tweets from Elections Canada, you also tweeted a couple days ago about the mail-in voting system, and you said to keep the vote by mail secure, eligible Canadian electors must apply to vote and then provide documents showing their identity, and then after you validate them, information will be accepted. So, just as I've been asking a lot of witnesses this question, do you have any reason to believe that mail-in voting is any more contributes to any more fraudulent voting activities than voting in person?
I'm not aware of any evidence that would support that concern.
Perfect. So just switching gears a little bit, in one of the first questioner's answers, you were talking about, you said something to the effect of, I tried to write it down here, you said you wanted people to, quote, come if they feel safe, end quote, to vote in person. So you're basically saying that you want to create the environment, and if people feel safe, you want them to come in person, but otherwise, they could look to mail-in voting or something like that. I'm concerned about the comment because I think it goes against what some health organizations are saying during the pandemic. For example, Ontario is about to go back into lockdown, at least it's being reported. And the word that's being given in Ontario is don't go out unless you absolutely have to, which is a little bit different than come if you feel safe. I wonder if you can clarify your position on that. I mean, I'm assuming that ultimately you would encourage people to take the advice of the health officials, correct? First and foremost.
You just stole my punch there. I certainly Canadians should, and we do follow the advice of public health authorities. What I meant to say certainly is that we want to provide a voting environment that meets those recommendations, and we want people to know that our voting environment will meet those recommendations. Now, the pandemic situation will evolve, and whether or not there's a lockdown and the extent to which people are advised to not go out will depend on the circumstances and will depend depending on region. But we want people to know that we will have put in place measures aligned with public health guidelines, so that they don't have to vote.
So if those public guidelines are to the effect of don't go out unless you absolutely have to, and mail-in voting is one of the options that you have, it can be argued that you don't have to go out. And so just getting back to Mr. Doherty and Mr. Tucker's questions about what can be done, and I know that you said you don't think anything can be done between now and the spring, but what if it's now and the spring of 2022? In my opinion, and based on information that's been given by chief electoral officers in provinces, they've really been saying that they wish their mail-in voting system had been more streamlined, easier to use, easier to access. Are you looking towards being able to do that so that people really understand and can utilize the system?
My priority is twofold. First of all, we're currently building an online application system for all Canadians to apply online for a kit. This does not exist at the moment. It exists for certain categories, so we're improving that. Online application does involve uploading of documents, and not all Canadians can do that, or there has to be other ways of voting. My priority in terms of simplifying is to make sure that confined electors, in particular people in long-term care facilities, are able to vote in a simpler way than is the case right now. I am concerned about the complexity for these electors. I'm concerned that it's unduly complex, and we need to look at to make it easier for them.
Thank you, Mr. Perreault. Next, we've got Monsieur Terrien, 2.5 minutes. Monsieur Terrien.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a question with respect to the support workers in long-term care centres. The last time you came before this committee, you said that these support workers in long-term healthcare homes would be used by yourself in order to oversee the electoral process. That's what you said. That's what I understood, I believe. Yes, to the extent that that's possible. Yes, absolutely. Yes, of course. So then how will that work exactly? And will that involve extra costs? These people need training. Will they be given a salary to do this sort of work? And will that involve extra costs? Well, here's what's important. There won't be one way to do it because there won't be one appropriate single way to do it in these long-term homes. In some cases, mail-in voting will have to be modified. In other cases, there may be, for example, mobile polling stations. There may be different kinds of systems that will be used. Hours may change as well. So there are many factors involved. what we have to do basically is have a flexible menu of options. And then we'll have to start preparing locally in long-term healthcare homes, and we'll have to see what their needs are. And we'll have to come back during the elections because their situation will have changed and evolved. So we need to be very flexible. I can't give you an exact cost of that. Thank you. But it is possible that there will be extra costs involved. However, you are confident that you'll be able to manage that situation, even if those situations are unique and are changing, despite what's in your budget right now. Well, I don't have a financial recommendation to make at this point because I don't think the main impact will be financial. I think what's important is to make sure people can vote. Thank you. I saw that there was a change to the honorariums, to the elections fees tariff. Well, we have made a submission. It hasn't necessarily been heard by Treasury Board yet, but I'm hoping that this will be approved as quickly as possible, because this has to be included in the pay system, and we can't integrate that into a pay system the night before an election. So the sooner we get the green light from Treasury Board, the better that will be. Thank you.
Vicky,
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
sorry.
Thank you very much. I'm coming to committee today from Manitoba, and as Mr. Doherty mentioned, there are many places in the country right now. Manitoba stands out among them, unfortunately, that are in a really under siege when it comes to COVID-19 right now. It's been getting out of control, frankly, and our medical system is getting to the limit of its capacity. We've all been advised not to go out if we don't have to, as Mr. Gerritsen was saying. I'm just wondering if, as some provinces begin to lock down quite seriously again, if you've been reaching out to provincial health officials to start talking to them about what kind of advice they might be giving you now if there were an election underway, so that you can get a better sense of what those public health orders might be that might be in place, and how they might affect an election if the kind of severe restrictions we're seeing now were in place for a federal election.
Yes, it's a very good point. Health is fundamentally a local matter. Monsieur Roussel has been engaging with there's a provincial federal working group of senior health agencies, senior health officials at health agencies, and he's been engaging them. And we have a working group in place to establish the connections, not just provincially, but also locally. We find that it's critical that ahead of the election, returning officers know exactly whom they need to engage locally, and that the local authorities understand what will be happening during an election and what kind of support they can provide to returning officers. So there's quite an extensive network of connections to be implemented as we prepare for this election. I mentioned the First Nations. That's a very vast and diverse group.
Do you have anything like a standing request in place to provincial health officials to notify you at any point if the situation in their jurisdiction gets to the point that they feel their public health orders might substantially interfere with the discharge of an election?
Unfortunately, we do not have that, though. As I said, we have connections through the Public Health Agency of Canada, and there is ongoing, engagement. So we have a sense of the evolution, but things can happen fairly quickly, and we have to accept that we may not get much notice if things change and health authorities feel that they need to intervene. It may be last minute.
And I guess I'm wondering, or I'm looking to hear from you that you won't be waiting until there is an election. We're seeing lockdowns now, and I'm wondering if that outreach could happen now so that lockdowns don't come and go, where public health officials might have given advice to say, we don't think you could actually safely hold an election right now. But then once the lockdown's over, that advice was never issued. We don't know that we got to that point because it was never on their radar because the question wasn't asked. And so I'm just looking for some reassurance from you that you might be asking that question so that we can learn from some of the lockdowns in place that are happening now in terms of what their consequences would be if a similar situation were to occur within the window of a federal election.
Yeah,
Thank you, Mr. Blakey. That's all the time we have. We went over a little while ago. I just wanted you to finish your thought. And Mr. Tucker, you're next for 5 minutes.
No, it's me. It's Todd.
Sorry, Todd, you're next then.
Yeah, thanks. I just want to go back to the line of questioning that both Mr. Blakey and Mr. Gerritsen brought in. Clearly, we're moving down a path. Clear that provinces are seeing increased numbers. I've said this before. It's been repeated a number of times. And there is real concern, and I think, Mr. Perot, you said the same. You want to make sure that Canadians can actually exercise their democratic right to vote. If voting in person was not a safe option for Canadians, wouldn't it be irresponsible to conduct a federal election? I understand that's a hard question to put it into you, but to both Mr. Gerritsen's and Mr. Blakey's point, at what point do we advise those above you that this is not a good idea?
So I think I've said this perhaps in my last appearance. We have a regime that contemplates a range of voting options, and I do not foresee a federal election where there's only vote by mail. That to me is not what the regime contemplates. The regime contemplates the main option being voting in person.
Yeah, but how do you say that? How can you say that with?
So, but let me finish. If there was a situation in a district where I cannot have poll workers, where voters cannot go to the polls, I think this dramatic scenario is one where I could invoke the power to make a recommendation to the governor and cancel the election. Now, that said, this is an extreme scenario, and we've seen in previous lockdowns that Canadians were allowed to go, for example, to grocery stores, and that there are ways to allow voting in person. But should health authorities feel that in voting person is not possible, then I do not see an election in that particular location.
Okay. Now, on that, I'm going to go back to the mail-in ballots question and ensuring that the vote was received. Ballots are barcoded, are they not?
They are. The special ballot, not the ballot itself, right? The envelope. Okay. The outer envelope is coded.
Is there not a system in place right now? So you're not recreating the wheel, that the ballot itself could be barcoded. Then electors could then log on to whatever system. It should be fairly easy, I would think, to implement. Many online services and courier groups have this, that can say your vote was received, so that you could provide that assurances to Canadians. And again, that just builds more of a robust mail-in opportunity for Canadians.
Yeah, and my answer to that is I'd love to do that, and we will be looking at that. But right now, my priority is putting together the building blocks of a mailing system that can handle 5 million. So I think this is in the order of priority, something that we'll get to at some point. But I just can't. I certainly endorse the benefits of that, but I can't commit to that.
Now you've spoke a couple times now on the identification requirements for those that are doing their mail-in ballots. But is that not discretionary? I mean, what are the identification requirements? Because C-76 came through, and I believe some of that was now made those identification requirements discretionary.
Those C-76 has not changed that, but it's a very, very good point. If you vote in person, there's no latitude in the act other than I can prescribe the documents, but you have to provide documents to vote. So that's in-person voting. If you vote by mail, the law gives me the authority to establish a means of identification that I deem to be sufficient. So I do have on the vote by mail system a greater flexibility. Now, we don't necessarily want a system where there's one way of voting that has a certain degree of integrity and the other one is a lesser degree. And so this is why if you vote by mail, I require documents. However, we have a situation where we have people in long-term care facilities. When you think about this, most of them have waited for more than 2 years to get there. They are now confined in those places. We know who they are. They're not going anywhere. Okay. So why would we want to have them upload documents?
No, I agree.
So what I'm saying is there are spots, in the country where there are problems, and we need to be more flexible.
I'm focusing more on the 5 million mail-in votes out, and also the 3 million Canadians diaspora that live abroad.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Right? And how do we do that given the circumstances that we're in? Thank you.
Thank you. I believe Mr. Alghabra and Dr. Duncan will be sharing their 5-minute slot next, and this will be the last round of questions, or the last slot. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Perot, in our discussions with other provincial returning officers, I can't remember which province it was, BC or Saskatchewan, but the returning officer had set up an advisory group made up of other parties, given the nature of election under a pandemic, and they were consulted on a regular basis on changes that may be required, etc. How do you feel about doing the same for a federal election?
In fact, we have that in place. It's in the legislation as well. So we meet fairly regularly with the Advisory Committee of Political Parties. We met late in the fall, and we showed some of the plans should there be a fall election, for fall election, including protective measures. And we are in the process of sending out invitations that may be sent as we speak for a late January meeting, and to see how the situation has evolved, whether there's legislation that's coming, and to have those discussions about the measures in place.
Yeah, it's good to know. And we are hoping to invite Canada Post before us to continue our study. Is there any questions that you'd like us to ask that you're curious to know? And we would be happy to pose this question to Canada Post. We will have our own questions, but certainly our intent is to make sure that they have the right capacity to do this job.
Well, I'm sure you'll have some pointy questions for them. We have an ongoing relationship, so I have the privilege of making sure my staff can ask all the questions we need to have from them. So I'm not going to suggest questions for you for the committee.
Okay. One last question is, and I think Mr. Blakey touched upon this when we invited representative of Assembly of First Nation. There was talk about need for additional training as early as possible. So I'd like to, draw your attention to that. It would be, even though we don't know the timing of the election, if there's and I know you answered that, but I just want to emphasize this point that it'd be really necessary to coordinate with First Nations on reserve, and to make sure that they have the right training and the right representation there.
Yes, I just want to make a nuance here between training and engagement and information. As we prepare for the election, we certainly need to engage and share some information, but actual training, of course, depends on who's going to be working and what exact procedure will be in place. So that has to take place during the writ period and not before that. But the basic point is true. We need to engage beforehand, and that's our plan.
Yeah. Thank you. Dr. Duncan, your turn.
Thank you so much to my friend and colleague, Mr. Alghabra. Madam Chair, Mr. Perot, the greatest tragedy of this pandemic is the lives lost in long-term care homes. And should an election be called, I want to ensure the health and safety of those living in long-term care. We have long-term care outbreaks in multiple provinces. I can talk about my own province. We had 100 long-term care homes in outbreak, with over 700 resident cases and 500 staff cases on November 13th. We've heard many recommendations, like no polling stations in long-term care, no election workers in long-term care, not being able to take residents out of the home to vote. I want to know, how if you could table with the committee what you are looking at in terms of protections for long-term care, as well as ensuring people's right to vote, and who has the ability, who are you listening to when it comes to protecting their public health, please?
We are, as I indicated, we are working on various options to bring in more flexibility in terms of the vote by mail or in-person voting in the homes. We have no plans to take the seniors out of long-term care facilities during a pandemic, of course, and so we are developing those options. But at the end, as I said, there will be local variations. We have to adapt to the reality of the staff and the people there. So there's not going to be a crystallized final set of procedure that is going to be applied everywhere. We really need to be flexible in everything.
I understand that, and I assume you'll be listening to local public health.
Of course.
I just want to ensure that we're not bringing infection. No one wants infection from the community into long-term care.
Absolutely, of course, that is our goal.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much. That is all the time we have today.
Madam Chair, if I might, I'm sorry, just before our witness leaves, I'm wondering if I could ask for a response to my last question in writing for the committee.
Oh, yes, that's right. Would you like to remind Mr. Perreault what that question was?
Sure. It was just looking for some reassurance that that they'll avail themselves of the unfortunate opportunity of current lockdowns to get a sense from provincial public health officials the conditions under which they might make public health orders that make the administration of an election impossible.
And we'll be happy to respond to that.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Perreault, Mr. Roussel, Mr. Leguise. No, I feel like I've gotten it wrong. And you haven't even had an opportunity to speak at all today. Is there anything either of you would like to say before we adjourn for today?
No, nothing to add. And it's Limoges or Limoges.
Limoges. Yep. Limoges. Well, it was a pleasure to have all of you here today.
Point of order. I'm just wondering, it's Karen Becchio.
Yes.
Are we going into committee business? What is the plan for now that it's 20 to 12 or 20 to 1?
I just wanted to say goodbye to the witnesses, and then we would discuss.
Okay.
We have a budget too. Yes.
Great. As long as we're going to committee business, that's what I wanted to ensure. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
So thank you for being here to all of you, and we really do appreciate it. You're always here for us. Okay. We have, in terms of committee business, we have one small thing. We have a study budget that was sent around to everybody. We need approval on that study budget. And then after that, I thought we could use this time, because before we go in camera, it takes a little bit of time to switch into camera to go into our subcommittee meeting for the prorogation study. And I believe the clerk also has provided I don't know if you've provided everyone with a calendar, but we do have witnesses slotted in for the remainder of this study. So we wanted to be able to discuss that as well in the subcommittee meeting. Justin, I'll let you take it over for the study budget.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yesterday, I sent a draft study budget to the members of the committee. This is essentially a budget that covers costs associated with the current study that the committee is engaged in on conducting a federal election during the COVID-19 pandemic. It's in the amount of $6,000. Most of the costs associated with that are to cover costs for the dial-in phone lines that we use in this hybrid committee setup, as well as the provision of headsets to our witnesses that we have been inviting and hearing from the committee. There is also a smaller amount with respect to expenses related to working meals that have been ordered for the members who are showing up in person to the committee. And so essentially, in order to cover these costs associated with the study, the committee does need to formally approve this budget It then ultimately gets signed by the chair, and then it will be sent off to the House of Commons financial administration people to ensure that these bills can be paid, which are the ones associated with this study budget. Thank you.
Okay, does everyone have the budget before them?
Madam Chair?
Yes, Mr. Doherty?
Unless there's any questions from any of our colleagues, I'll ask that they speak up, but I have no problem with this budget. So
thank you.
I don't have the.
You'll move to. Okay. Mr. Tucker, you don't have the budget?
No, I don't have it in front of me. I just wanted to know how much was on for these free lunches.
It was $750. It looks like total.
The total is $6,000 for the budget as a whole. It's $750 for the working meals.
$750 for the meals.
And Madam Chair, I can provide further explanation for that. Since the committee has moved into hybrid sittings, we have had 2 or 3 members showing up in person, and so the meals that have been ordered have ranged from about 3 to 4 meals per meeting for the members that are showing up. There is a unit cost associated with each of the catering orders, which is the minimum that the House budgets for. However, I can also assure you that the actual unit costs that are being charged to the committee are significantly less, in that generally the meals are consisting of sandwiches, a drink, and a little side order of vegetables.
Yeah, this is a much smaller budget than we generally ever pass in committees.
Can I say something, Madam Chair? I think it's hard.
Yes, Mr. Garrettson.
It's hard. It's harder to get your attention in person, which is what I'm learning.
And that's what I was saying at the beginning too. Everyone that's present in the room, I wish that everyone had an individual camera because it's really hard to see gestures there.
Next time I'll come and sit here and put Zoom on my computer. And I am slightly offended by the fact that Mr. Doherty was here with us 2 days ago, but now he's not. Mr. Lukiski thinks I scared him away, but but in all seriousness, I was just going to say that
I assure you didn't.
What I can say is that the lunches that are provided are basically the exact same as what we would get if we were to go into the cafeteria little room that they have there for us in West Block. So it's we're basically getting the exact same thing. And for anybody who's done this would know that, I guess.
Okay.
Hi. Point of order. Yeah. Just part of this discussion, I understand the meal concerns. And I think if we actually look at it, let's be honest, I am probably one of the people that eat the lunch most because I've been there so much of the time. So I do enjoy my ham and cheese sandwiches, but I don't know if everybody should have to pay for that. And as Mark mentioned, there is food available to us. So if we're done at 1, we can still get food. So that might be something we want to contemplate. I recognize it's only $750, but I don't know if it's up to the committee to pay for 2 or 3. I do thank everybody for paying for my lunches for the last few weeks, but I don't know if it's up to the committee to pay for everybody when there's just 2 or 3 of us there all the time. And I just wanted to put that into a point. Thank you.
To be honest, I was kind of raising it I was kind of raising it more like if I wasn't here, I'd be getting the exact same thing across the street and not coming out of the committee's budget. So I just don't understand like the logic behind the committee having to pay for the exact same thing that I would get across the street. I'm on house duty right now, right? So, and I'm also here. I could literally be the same things, but I don't want to belabor the point because I realize that it all comes
Mark,
from
you look like you might want to. You and I could go for 2 meals, though.
There you go. Exactly.
Yeah.
And anyways, we have to pass the budget that's before us now. I think when it comes to the meals, someone is always paying. And really, at the end of the day, it's all coming from the same place. It just gets divided in different budgets, right?
Point of order.
Yes?
Yes.
Mr. Tucker?
I would make the motion that we remove the free lunches. someone has to pay. It's the taxpayer. There's people going bankrupt across Canada, and we're talking about free lunches for parliamentarians. I get it that there's another place for free lunches for parliamentarians.
Yeah,
we don't have to have additional resources. Take care of nickels and dimes, and dollars take care of themselves. Yes, it's only $700 and some. I would ask that get removed from the budget.
Okay. Certainly, I guess what I was saying is not that, is that if you went and got that meal, the free meal in the lobby, somebody would still be, the taxpayer would still be paying for that lobby. So you're just shuffling where it's coming from, really. Just so we're completely transparent, parliamentarians do get free meals when they're on House duty in the lobby. So they're still coming out of the budget somewhere. Mr. Therrien.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had already broached the point that was just mentioned by my Conservative colleague. I agree with him, but I have to admit that Mr. Gerritsen is right. When you're on Parliament Hill, we have access to those free meals. So I was there in person once, and I believe that the fact that we're eating the same thing as what we would get if Ms. Becue, Mr. Gerritsen had stayed in our offices, quite honestly, I don't see it as an issue because we would get a free meal elsewhere anyways. I don't know if I'm making any sense, but it's not really an issue to me. I believe that the actual amount is a little problematic. It's quite high. So the parliamentary canteen ask for that kind of money. I think it's expensive for what we get, to be honest. But we would eat in the committee room what we would be eating in our office. So
how do we go about this? I think there's slightly different views on the same thing, and we could vote.
If I can add,
can we just move to suspend the lunches? Is that all?
Yeah, I was just going to say that I'm happy to vote in favor of Mr. Tucker's motion. I just I know we had this discussion when we resumed in September, and we were raising this point, but we decided to continue paying for it. And then ironically enough, when I subbed in on another committee who was then doing the same thing, they were saying, well, PROC did this and PROC did that. But we didn't suspend. So, I'm happy to vote in favor of it, but I don't see how, to Mr. Therrien's point, I don't see how voting to remove this really affects anything, because the exact same thing is available across the street. But if it's doing it for the purpose of signaling the importance of this, and to Mr. Tucker's point, counting the dimes and nickels, and then you don't have to count the dollars, then I'm happy to support it.
Okay,
if I may, Madam Chair, I'd just like to offer up a contribution to the discussion.
Okay, Mr.
That actually comes from the experience of my father in the 1990s when the Reform Party came to Parliament. Prior to that, meals were subsidized in the parliamentary dining room. So parliamentarians didn't get any free lunches in the lobby, but they could go to the parliamentary dining room and they could pay a reduced price for the meals that they ate on the Hill. And when the Reform Party at the time came to the Hill, they made a big political song and dance about that and ended it. And it was shortly after they ended it that the Reform Party began advocating for free meals in the lobby for MPs. And that's when and that's how that all began. So, I do think there's something to be said for transparency in the real costs. And sometimes these kinds of discussions around committee tables and elsewhere end up just kind of pushing what's going on off the books instead of having a very open accounting about how it all happens. And sometimes and I'm not casting any aspersions on current members. I'm, of course, speaking about what happened in the 90s. But sometimes it's the very same members who want to benefit from a public conversation about stopping something, who are then the very same people who advocate later for it to come back in a way that's less transparent. So I would just say we ought to be careful, and I'm comfortable endorsing a way of doing it that is at least, I'm saying this as somebody who has yet to participate in an in-person meeting of this committee. But I'm certainly prepared to support a way that's transparent about which committees are using how many resources in order to pay for things like food. As I think Mr. Gerritsen mentioned, this is something that this is the House paying itself, and this is a way of documenting how much of those resources are being provided to this committee specifically. So I think there's something to be said for transparency here, and I am concerned that we end up just pushing under the table information about the consumption of members rather than proceeding in a way that documents it clearly.
And if I can just say very quickly, Madam Chair, I totally agree with what Mr. Blakey said. He's absolutely correct. But then you also have to think, well, if people aren't going to be taking that lunch, are they going to be claiming the per diem? And is that actually going to be costing more? So I appreciate where Mr. Tucker's going with this. And I think that he's on the right path. But there are other sides to all this stuff that I think have to be considered. To Mr. Blakey's point, I think he's absolutely correct about that. Transparency has to be across the board.
We were going to be
Madam
moving
Chair,
into subcommittee, but Mr. Lukiski is next.
Yeah, I wasn't going to join in on this because for a number of reasons, but I would just point out that if we're talking about transparency and being cost efficient and the taxpayers' dollars, all of which I agree with, I would point out that we have over the years seen a lot of abuses with what's been going on. I will not name the former member of parliament, but many of us know him, who used to come and eat a lunch in the lobby every single day, even though he was only on duty one day a week. Well, we'll talk offline. And other MPs have done the same thing. To Mark's point, you are not supposed to, by the rules, claim per diems if you are eating in Parliament. Yeah. Now, with me personally, I don't eat in Parliament. I eat one meal a day, and it's always on my own dime outside of this office. But there are many, many, many MPs that have lunches at committees, lunches in the lobby, and still claim the full per diem. You are supposed to, by the rules, if you have a lunch in the lobby, eliminate that lunch from your daily per diem. I don't know how many members are doing that. So if we're going to talk about cutting down on cost, let's go all the way. I mean, let's really, talk about saving taxpayers' dollars.
No, absolutely. And that is my understanding, hopefully. But sometimes, we expect people to understand this and it's not said enough. So I think I do appreciate this conversation, although I didn't realize we were going to have such a lengthy conversation on this at the onset. But I've gotten to see a whole bunch of point of views here. And that is kind of what I was trying to say originally, is that are we taking something from one place and just shifting that cost somewhere else because we're upset that this cost is showing up here? So just think hard about that. And I guess, would you like, Mr. Turnbull, you have your hand up as well. And then if you'd like to have a vote on removing it, then we could perhaps have that. Mr. Turnbull?
Just wanted to ask a very quick clarification question. Is this a projected budget for future meetings, or is it costs that have already been incurred in a way which, in a sense, has already, we can't vote for taking something out of a budget that or expense claim that's already in a way been spent. It would be moving forward in the future that. So I just wanted that clarification on what's before me, which is it says request for project budget, but I want to know, is that for future costs or is that for past meals? We seem to be having a really lengthy discussion about working meals, which I wasn't anticipating, but I do find, just the basic amount of $250 for meals, I don't know how many people are attending, is quite high, but that's all. I just want the clarification.
Sure, and I guess the clerk can clarify.
Madam Chair, to Mr. Turnbull's question, these are costs that have been already incurred by the committee because there have been several meals that have been ordered already and consumed, as well as the use of the phone lines and headsets that have been shipped out. So in order to proceed, there would need to be a decision made on this current budget that's before you. The committee can always also then adopt a separate motion to essentially refrain from ordering any more catering for going forward.
So it's money spent already.
Yes.
So I move to adopt to adopt this, and then maybe one of our colleagues, if we want to move a motion to suspend meals after we do this, because it's money spent.
And it's a lot less than previous budgets we've ever approved, right? We don't have people flying in as witnesses. We're saving quite a lot, and I haven't had a single meal, that's for sure, and quite a lot of people haven't because we're all virtual. Most of us are virtual. Okay, so Mr. Doherty has moved. Does everyone agree on passing the budget we have before us? Okay, seeing that there's no one opposed to the budget passes. Would anyone like to pass or move a motion? Okay.
Madam Chair, I make the motion that we suspend all free lunches going forward until the end of the pandemic for committee.
Okay, would you like a recorded vote on that? Or is everyone in agreement?
Everyone in agreement?
I'm in agreement,
okay.
But what's the end of the pandemic mean? When we start meeting in person again? Is that what you meant by that?
In person.
Yeah.
Okay. Until we.
Okay. So we're I guess the motion is suspending meals while we're in the hybrid sitting.
Sure.
Okay. So as long as we're in this type of format, in a hybrid format, or even if it was to become all virtual, obviously, we wouldn't have meals. So depending on what's happening within this context, as long as we're not sitting all in person, we will have meals suspended, and I see no opposition to this. So the clerk has noted this, and moving forward, we will not order any meals for anyone. Okay, and now if everyone has been set, well, those that are,
Chair.
yes.
Sorry, if I may, I don't need to move this now because I respect that we want to get into the committee business portion. But a lot of the testimony that we heard today, I think, would be quite germane to the study that we're doing on pandemic elections. And I'm just wondering if you'll need a motion at some point in order to allow the testimony that we heard today from the Chief Elections Officer to be included in the body of testimony for that report. So be happy to move a motion to that effect at a time that you think is appropriate. But I'll just leave that with you for now, but didn't want to pass it over and then forget to do it later. So.
Yeah, maybe Andre, how would we go about doing that? Is that all that would be required, that we have a motion stating that we wanted to use testimony from the estimates towards our study?
And I suppose Justin would be better. Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. To start with, I suppose Justin would be better placed to discuss the procedure for doing it. My colleague and I, Laurence, had discussed this possibility, and we were sort of awaiting to hear from the committee as to its thoughts on the matter. We'd be more than happy to include it. It would be a matter of the committee giving us the say-so.
Yeah, I don't know if we need a formal motion. Go ahead. Sorry, Justin.
Madam Chair, strictly speaking, to formalize it, the committee could definitely adopt a motion to adduce the testimony from today's meeting, which it was on the study of the main estimates, for purposes of using it in the other study on conducting an election during a pandemic. It doesn't have to be done immediately today, but at some point before the report is adopted, it could be done.
Is there any opposition to doing that? If there's any debate on that matter, I see perhaps we should move it to another day. But if there's no debate, maybe perhaps you should just move the motion, Mr. Blakey, and
Sure.
And that would be taken care of.
Okay, provided that there will be no undue delays. Please consider that motion moved.
Okay, so I don't see any opposition to that motion. Any?
Carried.
All right. Perfect. Thank you so much. And so everyone who is a member of the subcommittee, please log in with the separate login instructions, password, and link that was provided in email. And I will see you back in a few minutes. And to everyone else, farewell. See you next Tuesday.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Bye.